Did you know that, once Trump's new tariffs come into effect, all cars on the market might get $3,000 more expensive on average? Automakers are bracing for a massive impact and, judging by the statement of their officials, the whole industry is in panic mode. Well, almost. Have you heard anything from the Honda CEO on this matter? Of course you haven't, because, unlike others, Honda's CEO quietly welcomes Trump's tariffs and, in this video, we will explain why. Massive impact on automakers. These are unprecedented times. This may be one of the most common phrases, but maybe for the first time in the history of the automotive industry, it's a bit more than something people typically use as a figure of speech. This time, things are serious, because the competitiveness of almost every automaker is going to be compromised. With new duties on products from Canada and Mexico, every automaker will face additional expenses and, according to experts, many of them are about to bleed a lot. In these days of inflation, massive strain from EV development and other things, it's clear that automakers can't deal with these tariffs on their own. In other words, they will have no other option but to delegate these expenses to their customers. In the common language, cars will get more expensive. And clearly, no one is happy. Because with the current prices on the car market, it turns out that cars produced in Mexico or Canada would get $11,000 more expensive. Of course, to keep the integrity and compactness of their lineups, it's pretty clear that automakers will rather choose to distribute the increase across the entire lineups, which leads us to a pretty absurd situation that even cars that are made in the US will also suffer from the new tariffs. Every car produced in the US, Mexico, Canada, or any other part of the world will get more expensive, and according to different estimations, that will be somewhere between $2,650 to $3,000. Needless to say, the industry has a serious problem, with some experts even suggesting a massive 30% decrease in the production of models that are exposed to the new tariffs the most. Ford Motor Company CEO Jim Farley is desperate because the company may be able to stand tariffs for a few weeks with their supplies. After that, the Blue Oval's profit is going to be wiped out, and that will have a further impact on the U.S. jobs and the entire system of the automotive industry. GM CEO Mary Barra hasn't been giving such dramatic statements, but she clearly pointed out the huge effect of these tariffs on their business. So the company is now considering restructuring its supply chain in order to absorb the massive hit from tariffs. German automakers have voiced that tariffs will inevitably increase prices in the U.S., which could easily push up inflation, while Nissan CEO Makoto Uchida indicated that the proposed tariffs might force the company to relocate from Mexico. Overall, the general consensus among automaker officials is that tariffs will have a detrimental effect on the whole industry, leading to increased costs, operational disruption, and job losses. In the meantime, the Honda CEO is quiet. And it's not because there is nothing to say. It's because a Japanese manufacturer could be one of the rare companies to benefit from the new duties in the long run. How is that possible? Well, let's say that the shifting landscape is going to put Honda in a stronger position in the U.S. market. It will operate more efficiently than rivals, thanks to its predominantly U.S.-based assembly and locally integrated production network. Honda will offer its models at more competitive prices, ensure profitability, and obliterate many of its rivals. Again, how is that even possible? Let's have a closer look. Honda cars are mostly assembled in the U.S. From Marysville, Ohio to East Liberty, Ohio to Greensburg, Indiana to Lincoln, Alabama. The vast majority of Honda cars sold in the U.S. market are produced in the United States. Simply, Japanese automakers have been conquering the U.S. automotive market for decades. It was a steady process that, once the right circumstances were set, allowed Honda to establish production in America. From that moment, Honda's focus has always been production on U.S. soil rather than imports. That move allowed Honda and other Japanese automakers to form even more competitive prices, which almost killed American automakers. Most of them were forced to take desperate measures and move production to Mexico, where significantly cheaper labor costs would allow them to remain competitive. So many that we can't say if most cars are coming from Detroit or south of the border. This has come to the point that, proportionally, many foreign automakers produce more cars in the US than American manufacturers. Decades ago, many Japanese companies started following this example, relocating their production to Mexico as well as Canada, but that was for some other reasons. Even Toyota based a solid portion of its production on Mexican plants. For example, the complete production of the popular mid-sized truck Toyota Tacoma is in Mexico, so you may presume the effect of tariffs on models like these. On the other hand, Honda kept the vast majority of its production in the US, with just one plant in Mexico and one more in Canada. But Honda produces only 3 models in these 2 plants. With a few exceptions, the rest of the lineup is American-made. Every part matters. The thing with tariffs is that it's not just about where a certain car is assembled. From engine to chassis to infotainment screen, every component matters and determines the actual cost of new tariffs. That's why we should refer to the so-called Cars.com American-Made Index, which uses a pretty complex method to show how much of every car on the US market is American-made, in percentage points, of course. Factors that have the biggest impact on the final score are assembly location, parts content, engine origin, transmission origin, and the US manufacturing workforce. And according to this list, Honda wins big. This list reveals some pretty interesting things, starting from the fact that you will find no Ford model in the top 20 most American-made cars. The rest of the big 3 don't stand particularly well either. 2 Chevys are there, along with a couple of Jeeps, 1 Lincoln, 1 Dodge, 1 Ram, and that's pretty much it. You want to know which automaker dominates the list? It's Honda. 6 models made it to the top 20, starting from the second-placed Honda Passport, Honda Ridgeline, Honda Odyssey, Honda Pilot, Acura MDX, and Acura RDX. So the next time we see a Honda on the street, we may think twice before calling it Japanese, because it's actually more American than, let's say, the F50 or Silverado. All these models are some of the most American-made cars, and that's actually a pretty solid part of Honda's lineup. And if we consider that, with the exception of a few imports, like the legendary Civic Type R, a few Canadian-assembled models, like a certain percentage of CR-Vs and Civic Sedan, as well as Mexican-made HR-V, other Honda and Acura models also have a pretty high American-made score. What this tells us is that, although a Japanese company, Honda is literally an American automaker, as far as it goes for models sold in the US, which leads us to the conclusion that Honda, as a company, will be less affected by tariffs than the vast majority of car makers present in the US market. Benefits in the long run. Honda is about to benefit from Trump's tariffs in the long run because it has a strong American production footprint. Compared to rival companies, Honda relies less on imports from Canada, Mexico, China, and Europe. Honda spent decades localizing its manufacturing operation, which goes way beyond assembly and involves a whole army of local suppliers. With plants in Ohio, Indiana, and Alabama, where key models like CR-V, Civic, and Accord are produced, Honda is better positioned than most competitors to weather the tariffs. Of course, Honda will face problems in the short term and will probably be forced to raise prices. But in the long run, things are likely to work out because rivals are far more reliant on imported parts. It makes them way more vulnerable to higher costs and potential sales declines. Honda has more options when it comes to leveraging its existing supply and adjusting sourcing strategies. So, while competitors struggle with the burden of tariffs, Honda will likely gain market share. Over time, this shifting landscape could put Honda in an even stronger position. Let's say that tariffs remain for an extended period. Competitors will be forced to relocate their production once again and build new factories in the US, which is a costly and time-consuming process for which most automakers are not prepared. Even if that happens, their extra costs will allow Honda to offer more competitive pricing, sustain profitability, and potentially establish a dominant position on the market while others play catch-up. Simply, Honda enjoys its unique position, and Trump tariffs actually represent a big change for further growth in the long run, because it will be able to maintain competitive pricing and absorb tariff-related expenses more efficiently, which opens a whole set of new possibilities for capturing market share. Honda won't just strengthen its position, it will end up as one of the biggest winners of the new trade policies. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.